Although I plan to release individual videos on each of the factions in the Division 2, there is still so much we're finding out about them every day. But also, in the interest of not spoiling too much of the story this early on, this video is more of an overview of the main hostile factions. You could look at it as sort of a trailer for some of my future videos that I'll be posting over the coming weeks. The Division 1 was based around the release of the smallpox virus on Black Friday, and the events that unfolded while finding the source of the outbreak and creating a cure. 7 months have passed. We now find ourselves in Washington, DC. Although the virus is still present, a cure has been developed, and the objective for Washington's division agents is more based around the events after society has fallen apart. During the initial phase of the crisis, important personnel such as the President, Secretary of Defense, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff were evacuated. The first attacks after the outbreak were on the Pentagon, the National Mall, and various landmarks. Following this, there were riots, and the city security forces were hit hard, forcing them to evacuate the capital. Supply lines were cut off, and after a few days, survivors were forced to band together into communities, organising themselves, taking up arms, and trying to rebuild. But at the same time, other groups had started to form. But these groups were less about survival and more about taking advantage of the situation, using power and aggression to raid these communities for supply and control. The HYENAS are similar to the rioters in the Division 1. They are an opportunistic group that is taking advantage of the now lawless land. They are easy to spot, usually wearing gas masks, ripped jeans and singlets, but can be often seen in riot gear too. Equipped with light firearms, they have a preference for close combat weapons like batons and baseball bats. Their general combat skills can be seen as unorganised and unprofessional. They often won't bother with using cover and instead charge manically into battle. Basically, their plan is to charge in and overwhelm with numbers. The majority of the group seems to consist of young adults who are either criminals, affiliated with gangs before the outbreak, or are just taking part in the widespread anarchy. They also appear to be heavy drug users, which could explain their erratic behaviour and willingness to carelessly charge in towards enemy gunfire. The HYENAS prey on civilian settlements through violence and intimidation. Led by a council of gang leaders, the HYENAS kill, steal, and destroy anything they can't just take for themselves. These are the survivors of a forced quarantine, hell-bent on revenge against those who brutally imprisoned them, and the society that stood by and let it happen. Their leader believes everyone is guilty, and urges her followers to punish those involved by spreading sickness and murdering indiscriminately. They are notorious for their sadistic nature and cult-like devotion to their cause, which is reflected in the use of suicide bombers and flamethrowers. Emmeline Shaw is the cult leader of the Outcasts. She is an asymptomatic carrier of the virus, and is focused and driven by revenge, and places priority on destroying anyone who betrays her. She is a charismatic, ruthless manipulator who exploits the weak. Earlier on, during her time in Roosevelt Island quarantine, Shaw lost her daughter. This was the moment that motivated her to form the Outcasts. The Outcasts are quite often compared to the Cleaners in New York due to their fanatical ideas and homemade flamethrowers and custom rifles, but their goals are very different. The Cleaners wanted to burn away all traces of the virus to save humanity, whereas the Outcasts want to punish society for leaving them to rot away in the quarantine. Disease, murder, nothing is off limits to them, as long as they are spreading the misery. After the original pandemic broke out, JTF in Washington attempted to control the spread of the virus by establishing a quarantine on Roosevelt Island. This job was given to Colonel Antoine Ridgway. He was to administer the quarantine and ensure that everything went to plan. After witnessing the tragedy caused by the virus firsthand, Ridgway started to lose faith in the JTF's ability to save Washington DC. He quickly came to the conclusion that there was no way they were all going to survive. While in the JTF, Ridgway deployed his men around the quarantine on Roosevelt Island, blocking all supplies, and allowing the sick to starve to death, as in his eyes, the sick were already dead. His priority was ensuring the well-being of his men. Because of the state the city was in, he was able to keep this up for a long time before his superiors found out. Commanding officers of the JTF eventually discovered what's going on and had him imprisoned. However, it didn't take long until members of his unit, loyal to him, had him freed. In Ridgway's eyes, he'd done nothing wrong. According to him, he was the only one with a realistic and viable solution to the situation. The betrayal of his fellow officers filled him with rage and hate towards the JTF and government. As soon as he got out, he had the members of his former unit capture the JTF officers that had him imprisoned and had them executed. And thus, the true sons were born.
Bar the gate, Sergeant. Looks like you got a riot brewing.
Lock and load!
Put it down.
Just as division agents seem to be making progress towards the retaking of the nation's capital, a new enemy appears. The Black Tusk are an unknown, secret private military organization. They are disciplined and highly organized. Easily identified by their black military attire and technology that's on par or even superior to the Strategic Homeland Division, they are highly trained and experienced soldiers. Using their drones and robotic war dogs, the Black Tusk quickly wiped through DC, undoing all the work that the division has achieved. Missions, settlements, strongholds, these have all been invaded by the Black Tusk. They are the greatest threat that the division has ever faced, and at this point in time their agenda is completely unknown. There are rumours that there are a group of elite soldiers that have a long history of working with the United States government, and that their primary objective is to destroy the division and take control of Washington, D.C. As I said earlier, this was just a recap of what will already be known by a lot of you. But for anyone only just jumping into the game now, the ones that may not have been a part of all the pre-release material, this may have given you a good starting point on the hostile factions in the Division 2. I've kept out any spoilers that I can for now, as I feel it's a little early for me to be able to fully explain some of what's been found. There are also a few other factions that have popped up in Washington DC, and I'm hunting down as much information as I can, both in-game and through the companion novels. We also have a number of characters that have resurfaced, as well as some new ones. As I'm sure you can understand, it's been incredibly difficult to pull myself away from the game to put this video together, but rest assured, I'm finding some interesting information relating to some of these factions and characters that I hope to be able to talk about soon. Although I'm stockpiling a lot of intel, if you have any interesting finds, and even theories that you may have, let me know. The echoes, phone recordings, and various other clues that seem to be popping up daily are on the next tier when compared to the Division 1. The challenging part is piecing it all together to make sense of it. Even though this video may have been nothing new to you, I hope you enjoyed it, and can see where I'm trying to take my future videos. Thanks for watching. Cheers!